7 o'clock. Let's go ahead and call the meeting to order. We'd ask Mr. Emmons to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome, everybody. First item on the agenda is any additions or deletions to the agenda. Do we have any? If not, we'll move forward with the agenda. The first item is approval of the minutes.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
We have a motion from Mr. Emmons.
Second.
Second from Mr. Day. Any discussion? All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, like sign? Hearing none, the motion carries. Next item on the agenda, item 4A, is a quasi-judicial matter. It's the Village at Three Oaks request for preliminary plat approval of a replat of a portion of the Villas at Three Oaks plat over site plan project. VB Three Oaks LLLP owner, Schulke, Biddle and Stoddard LLC is the agent. It's located on the south side of State Road 60 and the west side of 74th Avenue. Zoning classification is RM6, residential multifamily, up to 6 units per acre. Land use designation is M1, which is medium density residential, 1 up to 8 units per acre, and the density as proposed is 5.75 units per acre. As I say, it's quasi-judicial. It is on the consent agenda. Have you previously had quasi-judicial on consent agenda? I know we changed the rules to allow it. Have you had
That's
it?
correct. We have. Generally, what's done is to ask if any commissioners want to pull it, and then if anyone from the audience wants to speak.
And we'll do that. I do note that the agenda items that you have constitute the record on this. I would ask before we vote whether any member of the commission has had any either I'm forgetting my word.
Ex parte.
Ex parte, yes. I'm going to excommunicate myself is what I'm going to do. Ex parte communications, or has any conflicts or any other reason why you can't vote on this quasi-judicial matter. You can't consider the matter on a, based on the evidence and the law. And if not, I would ask if anybody has any questions or comments concerning the matter.
No.
Or if any member of the public would like to be heard on the matter. If not, do we have then a motion to accept staff's recommendation to approve the request for preliminary plat approval?
Move to accept.
Mr. Day, motion.
I'll second.
And Mr. Stewart, a second. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. We have item 5A is the next item on the agenda. That's Bent Pine Preserve, request for preliminary plat approval for a 134-lot conventional single-home subdivision to be known as Bent Pine Preserve. BP Preserve Partners LLC is the owner. Knight, McGuire and Associates, Inc. is the agent. It's located on the east side of 58th Avenue between 57th Street and 61st Street. Zoning classification is RM-4, which is residential multifamily up to 4 units per acre. Land use designation is L-2, which is low density residential, 2 up to 6 units per acre. The density as proposed is 1.69 acres. Okay, this is quasi-judicial, so again, I'd ask if any member of the commission has had any ex parte communications, site visits, investigations, conflicts, or any other matter which would prevent you from considering this matter with an open mind and base your decision on the evidence and the applicable law. Hearing none, I'll assume that none of you, that you have not had any of those items. Therefore, we'll go ahead. We'll open the public hearing. All those who intend to testify in this matter, please stand. And I'd ask Madam Clerk, would you please swear the witnesses?
Would you raise your right hand, please? Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Bowling.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll turn it over to our planner, Ryan Sweeney.
Let me move this over here.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. Tonight we have a application for preliminary plat approval for Bent Pine Preserve. It's a conventional single-family home subdivision with a total of 134 lots. The site is located on the east side of 58th Ave between 57th Street and 61st Street. It is located just west of the existing Bent Pine Golf Club and Bent Pine community. I want to note that the location map, the north arrow, everything is oriented up for north here, but everything past this point is to the right. So everything's been rotated 90 degrees. I apologize for that, but I did want to note that out. Here is an aerial depicting the existing conditions of the site, including some of the phase 1 improvements that were completed back in a prior approval in 2005, the reorientation of Bent Pine Drive, as well as a partial stormwater lake was constructed. The preliminary plat does demonstrate the lot layout of the 134 lots, as well as the associated subdivision improvements. I touched on this a minute ago. The site is actually phased. There's 3 phases, but one has already been completed. That's the reorientation of Bent Pine Drive, the entry on Bent Pine Drive, as well as a partial stormwater lake. The remaining 2 phases to be constructed include phase 2, which is 78 units, as well as all related infrastructure, and phase 3, which is 56 units, and all remaining infrastructure. The traffic circulation plan includes an internal loop road, as well as 2 driveway connections to the Bent Pine Drive, which ultimately leads to the intersection of 58th Ave and 57th Street, as well as a full access drive on 61st Street. The existing Bent Pine community will also have access through their existing drive, as well as through the proposed community to the 61st Street full access drive. There's also a 58th Avenue right-of-way dedication that will be required as part of this approval. And one other item that was noted during the technical review committee, some representatives from the Bent Pine Community Association were in attendance, and they just wanted to request and be sure, as part of the deed requirements, that the temporary construction access for this project be off 61st Street as opposed to their main entrance off Bent Pine Drive. And the plans do indicate that. The stormwater plan depicts the existing portion that was constructed under phase 1, as well as the proposed stormwater ponds or tracks. The landscape and environmental plan includes the existing wall and landscaping, as well as some existing landscaping along Bent Pine Drive. The proposed type B buffer with 6-foot opaque feature, which will be a 6-foot wall along 58th Avenue and 61st Street. The proposed littoral zone plantings, which are a little bit different in that they're provided separately from the regular stormwater ponds, but they are connected to the stormwater system. And lastly, the upland set-aside conservation area as required by the code. There are a number of dedication improvements that will be required for this proposal, including the right-of-way dedication for 58th Ave, as well as a release of the remaining excess 35-foot Murphy Act easement that exists along 58th. There are external sidewalk requirements along 58th and a short section between the 61st driveway connection and the 58th Avenue sidewalk. Internal sidewalks as well. Street lighting, the perimeter buffers along 58th and 61st, as well as the conservation easement for the upland set-aside. And lastly, I want to touch base. Staff does recommend approval, or does recommend that the P&Z approve the preliminary plat for the Bent Pine Preserve subdivision with the conditions listed in the staff report. And I want to make one note that under the dedications portion, which are under part 4 of the recommendation, that should read prior to or via final plat approval for each phase. So they can do the dedications via the final plat. Thank you.
Any questions from members of the commission? Any questions from the applicant to the county? I do have just a quick question. I know I'm going to regret asking this, but if you go back to page 6, at least it was numbered 6 in the lower right-hand corner. It might have been your first or second. We're not seeing it at this point.
I apologize.
Oh, there we go. Try 5.
Okay.
Yeah, that one.
Yes.
What is that red line?
That's the phasing line
Okay, I thought that
Between
might
2 and
be
3.
it. Okay.
between 2 and 3.
Anything else? If not, would the applicant like to make a presentation? Okay. Any questions from members of the commission of the applicant? If not, anything else that you'd like to present, either by way of evidence or argument? If not, we do have the record, which will consist of the materials in the book. Members of the commission? Any discussion? Would you like anybody in a position to make a motion?
Move to approve.
Okay, you're approving the granting the preliminary plat approval with the conditions listed in the materials?
With the recommendations, with
Okay.
staff's recommendations.
Mr. Day made the motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, the motion and the second are to approve the preliminary plat and to attach to that the conditions set forth in your agenda materials. Any discussion on the motion? If not, all in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, like sign? Hearing none, the motion carries. Thank you. Next item is a public hearing. Item 6A, Faith Baptist Church, request for special exception use approval for a modular office and stabilized parking addition. First Baptist Church, Inc. of Vero Beach is the owner. Chris Crawford, AIA is the agent. It's located at 7966 20th Street. It's zoned RS6, residential single family up to 6 units per acre. Land use designation is M1, medium density residential 1, up to 6 units per acre. It is a quasi-judicial matter. Again, I would ask the board with respect to this matter, if anybody's had any ex parte communications, site investigations, or has any conflicts or other matter which would prevent them from considering this matter with an open mind and base your decision on the evidence and the applicable law.
For the record, I have a professional relationship with Chris Crawford, but it will not impact my ability to make a decision on this case.
Okay? That being the case, we'll go ahead. We'll open the public hearing. Again, I'd ask anybody who intends to testify in this matter to please stand. And Madam Clerk, would you please administer the oath?
Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you.
And we'll proceed with the county's presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. This is an application for special exception use approval. It's a request to add a modular office building to the existing Faith Baptist Church campus. The special exception process, in this case, has been triggered because the proposed modular office square footage does exceed 10% of the existing building area, and therefore special exception use approval is required. There are specific land use criteria for places of worship in the code that need to be demonstrated that are met, as well as appropriateness and compatibility of the requested use needs to be assessed. And the process involves 2 public hearings, one of which is occurring tonight here at the Planning and Zoning Commission. The second public hearing would be a subsequent hearing in front of the Board of County Commissioners. The Planning and Zoning Commission is to recommend to the Board of County Commission to approve the request, approve with conditions, or to deny the request. The subject site is located on the north side of State Road 60 at 7966 20th Street or 7966 State Road 60. Here is an aerial depicting the existing conditions of the site, including the existing church building as well as the parking area and some additional landscaping around the perimeter. The site plan indicates the 2 areas of development or improvement, the modular office area, which is proposed to be west of the existing church building, as well as an additional parking area that is being proposed as part of this application. The landscape plan includes a 30-foot wide type B buffer between the project perimeter and the areas of development. As this site as this application is not a major site plan request, it's only required to bring the site into more compliance, and this proposal does do that by buffering the 2 proposed development areas. Also, as part of this request, the applicant has agreed to provide 13 additional stabilized grass spaces, which are allowed for intermittent use type uses like churches or places of worship. That will bring their minimum parking requirement up to current code, which is based on existing sanctuary seating. The proposed modular office does not provide any additional sanctuary seating, so it doesn't require any additional parking, but they are now meeting the current code requirement. As a summary, the proposed project does meet all the LDR requirements. It also meets the general and specific land use criteria for places of worship under the special exception criteria. And with the recommended condition that the roof material be either a metal 5V crimp or dimensional asphalt shingle, it will meet the State Road 60 corridor criteria. Therefore, staff recommends that the Planning and Zoning Commission recommend to the Board of County Commissioners to grant special exception approval for the proposed modular office building with the conditions stated in the staff report related to the roof material as well as the landscape buffer improvements. Thank you.
Any questions from members of the commission? Any questions from the
Yeah.
applicant?
Yeah,
I'm sorry,
go ahead.
Mr. Day.
You first.
Go ahead.
Yeah,
Oh, Mr. Evans.
define stabilized grass parking. Is this parking on the lawn, or?
Mr. Chair, Mr. Evans, essentially, yes, it is a grass surface with additional park stops that, have been evaluated to be able to withstand light use.
Okay.
Currently, they don't have this parking, and I don't think they have a particular parking shortage, but on
Okay.
certain days of, larger attendance, it will be utilized as more of an overflow.
And if I could add, Mr. Chairman, essentially the subsurface, there is an investigation of that so that it's not on just typically loose sand.
Okay.
There is some degree of compaction, but it can simply be sand underneath and turf on the top
Okay.
for infrequent use.
Mr. Day?
Yeah, I have two questions for you. One is about the parking. On your attachment 3, you show the new parking spaces, and 11 are marked C. Are those other 2 handicap? What are the 2 that are not marked?
Mr. Chair, Dr. Day, the 2 that are not marked with a C are standard size parking spaces. The 11 that are marked with a C are
Yeah, I
compact
see.
spaces.
Okay.
They're not, the handicap spaces are existing and they're marked with the HC in front of the building. Correct.
Yeah, and my second question is that the original building was built in 1978. And on page 3, you talk about the new modular office not generating significant additional wastewater for the septic. Is there anything about this proposal that triggers a septic inspection? Is there anything that is required to be inspected about the existing septic tank?
Yes, Mr. Chair, Dr. Day, the utilities are, I'm sorry, not the utilities, the health department is part of the technical review committee. They do conduct a review and investigation for applications like this. It's all based on, well, in this instance, it's based on standard wastewater flows, in which case they did determine that the existing system is adequate.
Any other questions? I assume we've not had any objection from the residents of 80th Avenue, is it, that's on the west side of this project?
Mr. Chair, we've not received any inquiries whatsoever. We did notice by mail as well as posting of a sign and public or ad in the newspaper, and we haven't heard any inquiries whatsoever.
Okay. Any other questions of the county? Does the applicant have any questions of the county? No, sir. Okay. Would the applicant like to make a presentation? No, sir. Any member of the public have any comment? If not, we'll go ahead, close the public hearing. The record will consist of the agenda materials.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I'm concerned about Commissioner Emmons' professional relationship with the agent.
Yeah.
I take it he buys insurance from you?
No, he was the architect on my bathroom remodel.
So that relationship has ended, I
That relationship is ended.
Thank you.
Actually, not quite, but it's recent.
And if it doesn't end soon,
My wife's not going to be happy about it.
I'm in the middle of a bathroom renovation. Pretty much the exact same thing.
Thank you for clarifying.
Thank you, Mr.
Okay, we have closed the hearing. Anything else then to come before us? And if not, the chair would entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve staff's recommendations on the matter.
Okay, Mr. Emmons made the motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Mr. Day made the second. Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion, please signify with aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, a like sign? Hearing none, the motion carries. Next item, also a public hearing. It's a this is item 6B, consideration of county-initiated amendments to the Land Development Regulations, Chapter 902, Administrative Mechanisms, to grant the Planning and Zoning Commission the powers of the Board of Adjustment. And this is a legislative matter. Mr. Bowling?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Well, let's actually first, let's go ahead and open the public hearing.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a land development regulation amendment. It's actually initiated by the Board of County Commissioners. Just a bit of background. The Board of Adjustment, also known as the Board of Zoning Adjustment, BOA, currently has variance authority. It's not to be confused with the Building Board of Adjustment, which deals with variances to the building code. This is simply the Building Zoning Board of Adjustment that deals with variances, mostly setbacks and dimensional criteria. Board of Adjustment variances are rare. We've only had 2 in the last 10 years. That's for a number of reasons. One is in 1985, we began requiring form board survey checks for setback compliance for new construction. And so new construction since 1985, there's been less than a handful of setback issues that because of that check in the process before vertical construction begins. We also have had on the books for a number of years now staff level variances and letters of legal nonconformity, which take care of older structures and nonconformities. We also have very strict criteria for meeting variances. It's a rare event when someone has a situation that qualifies for a Board of Adjustment variance. So for those reasons, they're quite rare. And again, only 2 in the last year. The Board of Adjustment membership has dwindled over the years. It's kind of difficult to have people stay on a fairly inactive board like that. Currently, we have only 2 out of 5 members and no quorum for that board. Staff discussed a potential change to have the Planning and Zoning Commission act as the Board of Adjustment and essentially dissolve the Board of Adjustment. That's the proposal in a nutshell, and the current chairman of the Board of Adjustment has no objection to that, understands the rationale for that. The Planning and Zoning Commission has development and land development regulation expertise. In fact, when you all look at plan developments, you're kind of setting setback regulations in effect on a project-by-project basis. The workload's not significant. Hope I don't jinx you on that, or ourselves. And staff recommended the change to the Board of County Commissioners to essentially have the Planning and Zoning Commission wear the hat of the Board of Adjustment if and when a variance application is filed. And that's what the proposed ordinance does. It adds to the Planning and Zoning Commission roles and responsibilities list the powers of the Board of Adjustment, that you have those powers. It would designate the Planning and Zoning Commission as the Board of Adjustment. It also would codify a current practice we've had of a variance decision of the Board of Adjustment could be appealed to the Board of County Commissioners. In this case, if the P&Z acts as the Board of Adjustment, the same would apply, that a decision would be appealable to the Board of County Commissioners. And there are no changes to the actual variance criteria, just who wears the hat of the Board of Adjustment. That's the change in a nutshell. The staff's recommendation is that the Planning and Zoning Commission recommend that the board adopt the proposed ordinance, and I'd be glad to answer questions that you might have.
So just a process question. So it's appealable, but doesn't go to the Board of County Commissioners?
That's
Is that
correct.
Okay.
This is a separate venue, and again, we've had one in the last 30 years that got appealed to the Board of County Commissioners, but we thought it'd be good to codify the process.
Makes sense to me.
And Mr. DeBral, there's no legal objection to our commission sitting as the Board of Adjustment, is there?
No, there isn't. My only thought was, is there some sort of controlling resolution that sets forth the membership? That there must be one attorney, one engineer, one something like that?
No, there's not.
Okay, good.
No.
No, I reviewed it and it looks just fine.
Okay. Any other questions or comments from the commission?
Yeah, I have one. In your analysis, you talk about the drastic reduction and what's caused the drastic reduction. And one was the institutional form board surveys, and the other was that in the 90s the LDRs were changed to allow staff level variance and determinations of legal nonconformity. So if you can do this at the staff level, why do you need us at all in this?
There are some rare cases that, for instance, one of the legal nonconformities in staff level variances is for structures built before we had form board survey requirements. So let's say there was a 10-foot side yard setback required, home built in 1976. It turns out it's only 9.5 feet. Well, staff can grant a variance because at the time of the approval, and this is in our LDRs, it was permitted for 10 feet. There was no form board survey check. It appeared to meet all the requirements. They got their certificate of occupancy. It's been there for years. We'll treat it as a legal nonconformity. So that put that into staff's hands. So those cases never come before the Board of Adjustment and haven't. But there could be a rare case where the size of a lot was changed by right-of-way acquisition or something like that, that now the shape, the size of a lot, requires a variance. Very rare circumstance that we get into. The last one that we had was really due to beachside erosion and the amount of property east-west that someone had to build on and meet our requirements. So we allow them to push the front yard landward a little bit to give them a little bit more area because they had less area on the east end, on the ocean side. Those are the rare type of circumstances that are beyond the control of the owner. Which is why variance requests, we have to allow for them, but I think they'd be very rare.
So was that beachside erosion question decided at staff level?
No, that was a Board of Adjustment
Okay.
level. We don't have
Okay.
the authority for that.
Yep.
Any other questions or comments from members of the commission? Any member of the public like to be heard on this? If not, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing. Commission members? Chair would entertain a motion to approve the staff's recommendation.
Move to approve staff's recommendation to give us more work.
Second.
Okay, that was Mr. Day made the motion. Ms. Calderon seconded it. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, like sign? Hearing none, the motion carries. Before we move on, out of curiosity, because I continue to learn this position, and I will come to the next meeting with ex parte communication written on the back of my hand, but
Fine.
why was the Bent Pine Preserve not under a public hearing part of the agenda?
Right, good question. It's a permitted use and a preliminary plat. It was a conventional project. It was not a planned development, so there was no special public hearing process. So really, the Planning and Zoning Commission has the approval authority for a preliminary plat for a conventional project, and that's why it's not a public hearing per se. But of course, as we're required now, and the Planning and Zoning Commission has always conducted, you would allow someone from the public to comment if they had a comment, but it's not
It's a
a formal.
quasi-judicial matter,
Correct.
which, at least in my mind,
Yes.
puts us down a hearing path, but maybe,
But it's not advertised, and although we do have sign notice requirements so that, someone driving by on 58th might notice the sign, or someone driving down Bent Pine Drive, and we do occasionally get calls from those signs. For any project coming before the Planning and Zoning Commission, there will be signs posted on a property, and people are invited to contact the county. With a public hearing, it's that plus notice to property owners within 300 feet and an advertisement in the newspaper. So everybody has a sign posted, and we occasionally get questions, but we did not on this one for Bent Pine.
Are all consent items quasi-judicial? I don't see where this is listed as quasi-judicial at all in our packet.
Right, on the item on consent, Villas at Three Oaks, it is on consent, and we did list it as quasi-judicial, which is why, on the agenda, which is why we went through that process.
So it's on the agenda?
Yes.
and I guess, Bill, or Mr. DePaul, that the Bent Pine Preserve matter, because it was quasi-judicial, and we've got to take evidence, I mean, we do have a hearing, It's just not a public hearing within the sense of the notice requirements?
That's correct. It's a permitted use.
Yeah.
And so there's not a whole lot for the commission to evaluate.
Yeah. Okay. Item 7 on the agenda, commission matters. Any members of the commission have any matters they'd like to raise? If not, item 8 is the planning matters, planning information package provided with your agenda materials. Mr. Bowling, anything you'd like to mention about these items?
Not those items unless y'all have any questions or comments, but in terms of our meeting schedule in March, kind of a repeat of February, of course, calendar-wise. March 12th is the next scheduled meeting. We do not and will not have any public hearings scheduled for that. We do have other current development projects that don't require public hearings and notice, so we may have some items in March, but right now, nothing on the horizon for March 12th. But we'll let you all know as soon as we know. That's all I had, Mr. Chairman.
And March 26th?
Correct. Is a possibility.
Okay. I am out of town that day.
Any members of the commission have any questions or comments on the planning information package? If not, item 10 on the agenda, the attorney matters.
Yes, there's been a request for a short presentation as far as sunshine law, public records, and a little bit of ethics. If it's the board's pleasure, I can bring that at the next meeting, whenever that might be. But certainly no need for a special meeting on something like that.
Yep.
We just try to do it on an agenda that's not overly crowded, but I assume we don't have an overly crowded agenda coming
Not on the
up
horizon.
in the foreseeable future.
Yeah.
Okay.
Very well.
All right. Great.
And just to follow up on Mr. DeBrawl's comment, I know you all are generally familiar with the Sunshine Law and the Public Records Act. The whole code of ethics and gifts and what you can accept and not, that's always been tricky to me, and that might be of perhaps a little bit greater value for you. Okay, anything else to come before the commission tonight?
Yep.
If not, thank you all for coming.
Thanks, everyone.
Gentlemen, thank you. Staff?